What is up everyone, Tal from the Airsoft headquarters here, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be doing an overview of the SIG Airsoft MPX AEG. Now, for a little bit of history lesson, the real MPX on the firearm side of things was released in 2015 as a modernized 9mm submachine gun, SMG. Because of how popular it was on the real firearms community, it has been highly regarded and a very highly controversial topic amongst the airsoft community and wanting to see this in full production. Since its release in 2015, we have seen several different types of prototypes as well as custom modified models on the airsoft market to represent the SIG MPX. But finally, we have a fully licensed final production model in front of us. Now, I want to make it very clear that this is not an American released product. This was still released over into the Asian market and was purchased from the Asian market and imported into the US. So this is not a US finalized product. I want to make that very clear right off the bat. Now, I am certain that a lot of the viewers here on this video have seen a video that I made a year and a half ago as to 8 reasons why we'll never see a SIG MPX. And I want to very quickly defend myself. So that was intended to be a clickbaity bullshit video, but also there was a little bit of truth, and some of the things that I did anticipate in that video ended up coming true on this rifle here. Now, at the end of that previous video, I also did say that no one in the store here or the Airsoft arena that we are partnered with wanted an MPX more than I did, and that still holds true. So as soon as we had a local player show up with his MPX, I very quickly asked what would it take to get this onto the channel in order to do a very quick overview on, and we were able to work out a deal. So this is not my MPX, so we're not going to go into super high depth into the internals or breaking anything apart. We are going to look at everything as far as a surface level, primarily external construction. So just as a heads up, if you guys are watching this, go down to the comment section and do a big thank you to the gentleman. He does want to remain anonymous, so just give him a big thank you because this video would not be possible without his contribution. So thank you for that as well. Hey everyone, Talon here. If you enjoy some of the content that we are able to produce, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And if you can, leave a like and a comment. We'd appreciate it. I do want to say as well that today's video will be a little bit more energetic compared to that of the video I made a year and a half ago. Please give me a little bit of a break then. I did make that video at 6 in the morning and did not have enough cups of coffee in my system to really make me go. So here we go. We're going to start from tip to butt with a little bit more energy this time. So right off at the top, we have our, because it is the Asian market, it is going to be a black flash hider. According to the original owner, this one did come with a mandatory orange tip, which in some countries are still required, but he did have the black tip that was in the box installed ahead of time, and it is removable. It is a 14 counterclockwise threading, so we were utilizing the Aztec Bifrost in a couple of the videos that we shot with this guy. Going backwards behind that tip, we do have a metal barrel system that is connected to the upper receiver here, and very similarly to that of the MCX or even the real MPX, the shroud of the handguard does come off very carefully, so the battery compartment space is up in the handguard. Now, while this is a little bit smaller of a battery compartment space, there is still ample amount of room to put 11.1, 7.4s. You do need to be a little bit more selective, but they can fit. Otherwise, what other players have done, myself included, is do an external battery pack on the top of the rail system or on the side of the rail system. For my MCX specifically, I have the Titan Power PEC box on the upper receiver part of that shroud so that I can still remove that handguard system without impeding or moving any of that internal wiring system. So that is some of the ways that I had to do that. It did require disconnecting and resoldering some of those wire points, but that is how I was able to make that workaround. So still a similar system that you could go about here. Now, This morning, I did visit a local firearm company, Midwest Industries. Maybe you've heard me talk about them a time or two, in order to see if the real rail system is compatible. Very quickly, it is not. I'll get into the reasons as to why it does not fit in a couple of minutes. A little bit of a car interruption. On the very top of that rifle system, we do have a long length of Picatinny rail system that comes out of the box pretty bare bones. No iron sights or any other type of accessories. And we do have just a simple micro reflex sight that is top mounted to here. So very, very, very basic. The shroud or the rail system that comes in the box is going to be a M-LOK direct attach system. We have 3 and about a third of M-LOK rail segments on the left and right, that 3 and 9 o'clock position. And on the very bottom, that is covered up currently with a angled foregrip that is M-LOK direct attach, is about 2 and a third M-LOK segments. So you have a little bit less room on that handguard side of things in order to, on the bottom part of that handguard, in order to attach your rail accessories. So keep that in mind. This is designed to remove and come off very similar to that of the real MPX. So pulling that receiver pin to the side and holding down on that upper receiver will allow you to pull that rail shroud off of the rails that hold it to that upper receiver. And again, you do have to have that receiver pinned in place all the way flush in order to hold that rail system in place. Otherwise, it can fall off while in operation. We do have a little bit of texturing on the front of the mag wheel here, which is very cool aesthetically, but it doesn't add anything as far as any type of positive reinforcement while grabbing. I will say that this rail system is a little bit better of a system in order to do a mag well grip. So if you are someone that prefers a little bit more vertical of a grip system on your rifle system, grabbing that mag well, just very gross mechanic, is a good amount of retention in order to control that rifle system. Granted, there's no amount of recoil on airsoft guns, so recoil is not a huge thing that we need to manage, but if you intend on moving very quickly, going through hallways, pine corners, that is a good place to grab onto. Sticking out of that mag well is our mid-capacity magazine that comes in the box with it. These are going to be in imitation dummy round style, and the capacity of this mid-cap is about 100 rounds. We shot about 98 total rounds through it, but you know, 98 to 100, 2 rounds, we'll just round up to 100 total rounds. Now, this is going to be intended for what looks to be a high capacity internal system. So it looks like they're utilizing the same housing, because there are little bits of cuts on the back here where you would insert a finger in order to pop that high capacity magazine window open. So I think we'll have mid-cap and high capacity magazines available on the market. As of right now, there are no magazine listings in order to purchase additional magazines. So you only get the one that comes with the gun. Going backwards on the receiver, on the right-hand side, we do have a smaller 9mm sized ejection port. If we pull that charging handle back, it does retain that imitation bolt backwards, so you can adjust the rotary style pop-up unit, which is attached to a 6.5 inch about inner barrel. Now, judging purely looking through the end of that barrel, it does seem to be a 6.05 to a 6.08. So not a true tight bore inner barrel, but it is going to be a VFC type of inner barrel. So I like those. They're very consistent, and they are utilizing what appears to be a standard VFC rotary hop-up unit. So good on them. Because that imitation bolt does retain backwards, you can, on the right-hand side of the receiver, press inward on that ambidextrous bolt release in order to release that imitation bolt forward, or you can press on the left-hand side of the receiver in order to press that bolt back forward. So very cool that they have ambidextrous functioning controls. The magazine release, very similarly to the MCX, is going to be ambidextrous as well. So sliding that magazine in, which additional note, that mid-cap magazine doesn't go in very nicely. You do need to move it back and forth in order to find that sweet spot to get it to slide in nicely. You could totally just absolutely slam the shit out of that magazine in order to get it inside of there. The mag wheel is flared, so it's designed to be a little bit easier to get that magazine in. However, it is not our rifle system, and the original owner made sure to tell us not to slam that magazine in, and of course we don't want to do that. So making sure we find that correct position in order to insert that magazine. We have our right hand control, and then we have our ambidextrous, which you can use right hand oriented in order to release that magazine, or if you are left-handed, hit that magazine release in order to pull that magazine out. You have multiple ways in order to release that magazine. Going backwards, we have our ambidextrous selector switch, which we have on the left-hand side here and on the right-hand side here. Left-hand side is going to have a little bit more length to it because we primarily have right-hand based of shooters. However, due to the ambidextrous selector controls that are present on the MCX and from different distributors describing that these have the same Avalon gearbox as what's in the MCX, I can pretty safely tell you that you can swap those selector switches. If you are left-hand oriented, you can take the selector from the left side of the receiver and install it to the right-hand side of the receiver and then back and forth. The one thing that I want to make sure that you guys are aware when changing that selector is that there is a ball bearing on the inside of that selector that does sit loosely. So don't take your selector off in this orientation. Lay the rifle down flat and undo that selector screw. That way you can control where that little ball bearing is going to fall down towards. On the side of the receiver, on the mag wheel on the left hand side here, we do have that SIG licensing and an individual serial number. Very cool that they went with that. We do have our standard engraving as far as safe, semi, and filato. On the grip here, we do have a SIG Sauer, and speaking of the grip, you may notice that the grip orientation is a little bit more exaggerated in a downward position compared to a standard M4/AR orientation of grip, which is going to be angled backwards a little bit. Some of the things I'm a little concerned about is that orientation, making sure that it is interacting with those internal gear systems in the gearbox appropriately. If those are not correctly engaged, they can start to wear and tear some of those internal parts and components. However, this is VFC, so I am wholeheartedly trusting that they did take this into consideration, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. The SIG grip I like a lot. They do have different types of contours and shapes to them, which is very comfortable to a multitude of different shooters, older and beginner, that highly praise the SIG type of grips within airsoft and the real firearm industry. Which on the very bottom here, we do have our motor height adjustment and access to that motor plate. Based on the length of the grip, this is going to be a long type of motor, and the fact that it is going to be a version 2 gearbox. So that is what we have in that orientation. Staying on this side of the rifle, we don't have any of that licensing other than the SIG Sauer on the grip and those little indentations on the selector switch for safe, semi, and filato. I do want to bring up that on the upper receiver, we do have these bevels cut into the upper receiver. I shouldn't say cut, but they are cast, however you want to describe it, into the upper receiver, so that in addition to the retractable stock like I have here, the arms of that stock, when pushed all the way forward, can ride inside of that channel in order to have a total retracted position. That is something that is similarly manufactured on real rifles as well as the MCX for airsoft, especially since this is the MCX stock. I have on my MCX the actual folding stock that is present here. Speaking of the stock system, I know that several people would have preferred to see the Pdw stock on the MPX. I agree that aesthetically it does make more sense. However, I may be getting ahead of myself, but I like the length of pull on this folding stock here, especially combined with the shorter MPX. The total outward length of difference between the folding stock and the retractable length, all the way retracted outwards, is only a difference of 1.5 inches. But in my humble opinion, I think that this is a little bit better of a holding position compared to this all the way outward. Now that 100% is going to be a personal preference of preference. It sounded really redundant, and it completely is. But that is what I have to say about the difference between the folding stock and the retracting stock. But speaking of the folding stock, I like this, especially since this I think is better than the real MPX stock, which is what I have. That's one of the real ones. This one, obviously, it's a folding stock, so it is going to allow for a little bit better of a storage compartment space. So you can keep that folded up, you can take that magazine out, and it holds really, really well. It's designed to be very small, compact. Due to the system that SIG implements on their real rifles, which is a dual spring guide rod that rides on the top of that bolt, that means that you can have a folding stock on the Pdw or even on the real rifles. That's a very cool system that they implemented. So there's no need for a buffer tube on the real ones. And they implemented that similarly on the Airsoft rifles. So folding stock, when it's all the way folded, it is going to have a total length from tip to butt of 17 inches. Not a whole lot of length there. Now we fold the stock out. My light just died. Oh well. Fold the stock all the way out, and it's a length of 23.5 inches. So add on a couple of additional inches, but then all the way out a total length of 25.5 inches. Now compare that to the retractable stock, which only has 2 total inches. It doesn't have a folded position. So all the way out is a total length of 24 inches, and with that stock all the way in is a length of 20.25 inches. So take that into consideration if you are looking at different types of storage compartment spaces, whether that be for a carry case or maybe you have a specific gear locker in your basement, in your garage, what have you. With the folding stock, we do have a quick detach sling position, which we don't have similarly anywhere else on this rifle system. If you did want a quick detach system, that would need to be an additional point added to the rail system on the top or the side or even on the bottom, whatever you prefer. But the only sling position is a quick detach and an actual sling loop back here. And that is it, which being a little bit shorter length of a rifle system, letting it dangle from a 1-point sling is really acceptable. It doesn't have a whole lot of length to it in order to impede any type of movement as you run or even walk around, compared to trying to have that sling position on an MPX. It's just a little bit too long and can kind of get in the way as I walk around. The button that retracts the folding stock is much easier in order to push and engage and slide in and out. Super easy to do that compared to that real one that I have. It is the same button in button design, but is much harder to engage that button. And it is not just because I have paint on here. It was doing this before I added any type of color to it. So this is the real SIG Sauer stock. This is the Airsoft SIG Sauer stock. So that is essentially what we have as far as a complete and total overview of the SIG MPX. In usage or in conversation with the original owner, he did express that he did want that Pdw stock, which I was more than willing to install and provide for him, since I did have a Pdw stock in my collection that I had no use for because I had pulled it from my Airsoft MPX. Removing the stock is very, very, very simple. It is going to be a 2.5 millimeters as far as the Allen screw, and then this just pulls upwards and off. And then we have access to the very back plate here, which is a 3-slot Picatinny, which is very classic on SIG style of rifle systems. On the very back plate here, we also have access to that spring guide rod. So utilizing I believe that is a 6mm Allen screw, you can press inwards, rotate, and pull that internal spring out. Now, with the set spring that came in it, it doesn't come with an additional spring in the box. So the spring that comes with it is going to shoot about 356 FPS with 0.20 gram BBs, and that is through a total of, I think we took 30 or 50 total shots. So that is what we have there. We have a very consistent reading as well. So installing that Pdw stock is going to be pretty easy. Now, one thing we do need to consider is the channels on that upper receiver, like I was telling you about. So what I typically do is, when I have that Pdw stock on there, make sure I have that spring guide rod aligned correctly internally, as well as giving me enough room on the side here in order to press it down, is I will give it a little bit of length. I'll go to the middle position to make sure that there is enough room for the bars of the Pdw stock to move back and forth without resistance. If we go too high or too low, those bars are going to rub against the walls of the external part of the receiver and are going to start to wear away at that finish, which we don't want. So, giving ourselves a good amount of distance from the top of the wall to the bottom of the wall, or to the channel, we're then going to take our Allen screw, which I believe this guy is a 2mm, maybe 1.5. I don't know, found it in a drawer of Allen screws that we have and it happened to fit. Tighten that down, and now we have our Pdw stock on the SIG MPX. With this Pdw stock, it does still retain a quick detach sling point on the very back of the stock here. There are only 3 total positions of this stock: all the way in, a middle position, and all the way out. We also have a sling loop on the very back here if people do have any type of preference with that. That is what we have as far as the Pdw stock. Like I was saying before, it does have, on the farthest out position, it has a shorter length of pull. Granted, it's only 1.5 inches, but this doesn't quite reach out far enough for me personally to want to shoot comfortably. I find myself in action doing a little bit more of a sight over bore, where the rifle itself resides a little bit lower on my shoulder, so that I can then have a little bit more comfortable of a grip orientation position here, versus coming back up and then scrunching my entire upper body and shoulders in order to get that red dot up to my line of sight. That is just a personal gripe though. Not everyone's gonna have that problem. In fact, some of the other guys here actually prefer the length of pull on the Pdw stock. And again, everyone has their own personal preferences. The original owner wanted the Pdw stock, so we're gonna provide him that Pdw stock. And that is the total look that we have there. So regardless of what you prefer as far as length of pull as well, some people may have a consideration as to the difference in weight. And some people may assume that the Pdw stock actually is lighter. That's actually not true. With the rifle and magazine, with the original folding stock, the weight was 5 pounds, 15.5 ounces, versus putting the Pdw stock on, which comes to 6 pounds, 2.5 ounces. Now that's only a difference of 3 total ounces, but we know that a lot of more extreme airsofters are going to have that same mentality when they start packing their gear, that ounces are going to equal 2 pounds. So if that is a consideration that you have that information readily available for you guys. Some additional notes that I have for the SIG MPX. Well, the first thing is going to be the imitation bolt release. The action of pulling the bolt backwards is a little bit more basic. In fact, there's not a set spring on this model in order to push that bolt back forward. you have to manually push that bolt back forward in order to have it seat properly. So releasing that imitation bolt, I'm going to show that again. Pull backwards, and there's a lock of that imitation bolt locking into place, but there's no spring to push upwards. You have to manually assist it forward, and then you have that imitation bolt release. Compared to my MCX, which has more than enough spring power on that charging handle, internally these should be the exact same, this one has more than enough spring power in order to push it backwards and have it spring back forward. So we have that as an example for you guys. Now it could be something that needs to be worn in internally on this guy, but again, the MCX is just significantly easier. Talking about the Midwest Industries rail systems, bringing that back into topic. This morning I did go to the Midwest Industries rail store and I did speak with their customer service guy, and he did bring a real MPX out with the Midwest Industries rail system, and we did try the Midwest Industries rail systems on here and they were not compatible. The upper receiver of the Airsoft MPX was wider than that of the real MPX. That is something that I totally forecasted in the previous video that I made about these MPXs, and that has come true. So you are not able to take aftermarket firearm MPX rail systems and install them onto the Airsoft model. And then if you try to reverse that, putting the Airsoft MPX rail system onto the real one, the cuts in the bottom portions here are not cut the same way either. They are not cross compatible. So unfortunately for anyone that wants to do a cool John Wick MPX build out with some Terran tactical furniture, that is not possible. So you are kind of stuck bare bones in the length and furniture that it comes with. There may be some external Terran tactical accessories that are available, but I don't have those available in order to make sure that they fit or not. So that is what we have for Midwest Industries rail systems. I already talked about it, but I wanted to bring to your attention again, and that is the orientation of the grip here. Like I said, it is a little bit more oriented in a vertical position compared to that of a traditional Airsoft AR pattern of rifle system. So something to take into consideration there, and making sure that you're not incorrectly adjusting your motor height. You're not playing with the alignment too much. Kind of just leave it as is and just let it run its course. Ooh, so this one I actually need the assistance of a battery. So as far as batteries and what I explicitly suggest, it's going to be based on what you personally prefer. Now, the original owner of this did explicitly say that he wanted a 7.4 volt only, so that is what we are utilizing. However, on semi, it is going to be a little bit snappier of a trigger response. On full auto though, that rate of fire is very drastically slowed down. Now, we did get to a point, I heard it in that cycling, where it was about to shoot. So we should be within the gearbox at a halfway or 3/4 positioned piston. So if I put it on semi, now we have a locked position because the 7.4s are going to efficiently move through that singular cycle, because on full auto we have that rotation selector system disabled, so it can turn over without having to count exactly where that cycle is. On semi-automatic, especially 7.4s, it needs that whole rotation in order to efficiently move. So unfortunately, when it's locked up like this, I can't physically pull it backwards. We need to go into full auto, do a burst, and then go back to semi and try to get it to where it's in the correct orientation. So where the piston is all the way forward and the gears are in the very first step. So So it took a little bit of time, but we were able to find that position on 7.4s. Now, I don't know what exactly will occur on 11.1s. Part of my concern is the orientation of the motor placement here. With 11.1, it can overturn those internal components to where it's going to start to break down those internal parts. Because of the alignment, it can stress those internals, strip them, or break them, which we don't want. We don't want premature wear down on our internal parts and components. However, with the 7.4, it doesn't have enough energy in order to cycle it completely. So we're kind of in a weird position as far as what we would suggest for batteries. For safe shooting, for longevity, I would probably suggest a 7.4, and then just have to deal with finding the correct orientation of that motor in order, or of the gearbox cycle, in order to have it work efficiently on semi-automatic. If you want it to just work, if you plan on going back and forth from full auto, semi, an 11.1 is probably going to be your best option. Now, something like a Titan Power may be a good bet, especially since those are going to be 11.1. They're going to have a little bit more kick, but the C rating is going to be a little bit lower. So you're not going to overstress those internal gear alignments. So we're in a little weird of a position because we can't test this out, because the owner did say 7.4s. So we're going to respect his wishes, and we're only going to do 7.4s. So that is what we have as far as this right now. So we're going to put this back. Repositioning is fairly easy, making sure that the wiring and that MOSFET and that motor connector, or that battery connector, is out of the way. What I have seen, especially with the position of the wiring system being angled forward and hanging in where the rail system is pulling downwards, what can happen is there are little bits of edges on the rail system that can grab onto that MOSFET or onto that battery connector, and can start to align those electronics in a not super great position. So we are having to carefully position those wires as we put the rail system on. Takes a little bit of extra time, but overall is not too bad. I think in the long haul, or when I do get my personal MPX, I will very quickly transition everything over to a external battery pack. There we go. Very similar to what I have on my MCX. And that is what I have for you guys. Now, we did some cool aesthetic nighttime low light shooting utilizing the Aztec Bifrost tracer, which is compatible and does work. As far as what tracer units or mock suppressors will fit onto this, there is a lot of room, some generous room that is allowed on here in order to slide your rail system on and off. However, because there are no other rail systems available on the market, I would potentially suggest, and because the barrel ends at where the rail system ends, you can put whatever type of mock suppressor you want on the end here. So if you want a really big, large SD style of mock suppressor, that really big can, in order to hold your battery into that rail system, that is a good option. I would totally suggest doing that. Otherwise, if you just want a smaller little like Aztec on here in order to have a tracer unit, and you don't want to worry about taking it on and off when you install and take out your batteries, the Aztec Bifrost does sit comfortably, and you can take that rail system on and off without scratching up the surface of the Bifrost. So that is an option. And that is pretty much the entire length of the overview video that I have for you guys. I'm very happy that we were able to get a hands on a SIG MPX. Granted, it is not personally mine, so I can't say that I'll get you any gameplay. But again, huge thank you to the original owner to allow me a little bit of time to do some testing, get a little bit of shooting footage with it, as well as provide some B-roll clips for you guys, for everyone that is curious as to what the MPX may look like. Now, again, I want to reiterate, this is not the American market of MPX. This is or was purchased over on the Asian market. So this is not what we could totally get. We also don't have any type of ETA as to when we are going to get an American produced MPX. There is still a possibility we may not see an American MPX on the American market. That is still 100% a possibility. That has happened before, it can still continue to happen. So do what you want. I know that customs for sure are cracking down a little bit more as to seizing some of the imported guns from overseas. So we got to do with what we can. So if you want to take that risk as far as trying to purchase something overseas, you do it at your own risk. Otherwise, I will probably patiently wait until we get an American market that is spec for the American market. And that's my personal decision. That's how I'm going to do it. If you guys have any further questions about the MPX or anything else related to the MPX, put it down to the comment section below. I'll do my best to answer them, but we're all done here. So you guys take care, stay safe, stay positive, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. If you want to take the heat on this one, I'm okay with that.
No, I'll leave.
No. It's such a nice product, Helen. I wouldn't want to steal your spotlight.
Yeah, when is it coming to the U.S.?
It's not.
Do it.
Yeah.
And then eventually, no, you'll make this video. Then when it's released in the U.S., you'll make like a YouTube apology short.
Oh yeah. Then you can drop that.
Yeah, drizzle the content. You know what I mean?
All of the Airsoft YouTubers at SHOT Show are going to be interviewing me. Talon, did you ever expect to be this fucking wrong?
What's it like
Not once, but twice.
What's it like being a fucking moron?
The SIG booth has a picture of me and says, "Don't let this guy in." They literally have it taped off, and there's literally a line to get into the booth, and they have bouncers there checking IDs.
It's a wanted poster, and it just says for misinformation.
Wanted for lies and blasphemy.